Liam invited me about 2 or 3 weeks ago to come and talk here, and it's quite topical at the moment, as you can imagine, and both the presentations so far have touched upon this. So this is a question. Is it expensive? Hands up who thinks it's expensive. Okay. Or is it just not affordable? Okay, so I'm going to touch on some of that. And do we really know how to measure and compare how we do track renewals across the country? Because when I see slides like that, and please take a deep breath for anyone who works in track and often gets sent slides like that on its own, it means nothing. Because on its own, without the commentary behind each of those bars, it means absolutely nothing. Now, I had the pleasure before devolution to work across the whole of the UK delivering track renewals, S&C, high output and plain line all over the place. And I could probably stand up here and articulate why we are where we are with some of those numbers that are on that graph. There's a big echo in here. You might want to turn the lapel mic off if you could. I could talk quite articulately about why we are where we are with some of those regions. But somebody presented me with one of these slides recently, which was actually broken down by route. And their comments were, well, look at the guys in Wessex, they're bloody expensive. They were comparing them to everybody else. Well, actually, the guys in Wessex are the same as the other guys in Southern who deliver track renewals, because it's the same people. So it just makes the point about sometimes, we look at, we compare ourselves, apples with apples. We would like to think we're comparing apples with apples. Sometimes, even if it's apples with pears, you kind of think, okay, that's still okay. But often, we're comparing apples with chairs. Because sometimes we're not absolutely comparing the right things, because we're getting quite good in Wales and Western of understanding the cost of all our jobs. So Andrew, our RAM, is in the room here today as well. And Andrew, myself, my project managers, my program managers, my engineers, they should be able to look at that graph, and if they hover over it on the electronic version of it, it'll tell them which site is which. And then they should be able to articulate to me, and I should be able to articulate to anyone else in my business, part of the business, is why is Machynlleth one of my highest unit rate jobs? Why is Severn Tunnel one of my best unit rate jobs? And it's great that we've got that information, but if you see the red line on there that says this is that kind of high benchmark level, and then you see the others, the blue dotted line is my average in Wales and Western, and then the bottom one is the low benchmark level. When I was producing these slides, I was asking my colleagues in finance about, okay, so tell me what costs you are including in your benchmark numbers. And I got different answers from each finance person that I spoke to. And likewise, even with my own team, and talking to Andrew about, but are we really sure that we've got all the indirect costs in the numbers, or have we not got them all in? So we've really got to make sure that we are comparing apples with apples when we're doing this, because otherwise it upsets people. I often get upset, as Andrew would know, when people tell me that I'm expensive, because I don't think we are, and hopefully the next few slides will explain why I don't think we're expensive. It's just maybe we can't afford what we do sometimes. So we've got all of this information now, so if anyone's interested in how we do this, I've got all this available electronically, and I'm helping my finance team in the region create this for all the other disciplines as well, not just track, so that everybody in the team, whether you're a very early stage engineer, very early stage project manager, or someone like myself, or anyone else in the team, you should be able to articulate why jobs cost what they cost. Now, so just to prepare for today, I thought, right, I'm gonna get one of my team, which I did, to just create me the most simple kilometre job, the base costs. This is the most simple thing. So none of that was in there. So I said, right, strip it all out. Take all the complexities out. It's a nice straight piece of track between Cardiff and Newport. It's got no structures in it. It's got no sand in it. It's just a simple Cat 11. And all of that other complexity stuff was stripped out of the cost. And that's what it was going to cost me to do that job. Over £1 million. Now, you saw the rates that were on that slide just now. 1.4 million was my high benchmark level, and $1 million or so was the low benchmark level. So if I do the most simple job in one stage, that's 1 kilometre in one possession, in the most simple way, it's going to cost me that. With the costs that we're experiencing in there, And there's some fixed cost in there, and there's obviously some variable costs, because yes, we can be better. We can obviously do better. We can always do better. But that's what it was going to cost me. Now, this is using the SRSA framework rates. Now, if you did this exercise for the other alliances, it might be different. And also, we have 3 deliverers of track in Wales and Western. We have high output, and we have works delivery in old language. We've decided to call them construction services, but it's works delivery. So this is using the SRSA frameworks. And the type of work we put through the SRA, we did a piece of work, Andrew and I, a few years ago, to just absolutely build a decision tree to say, this is the type of work that should be going to my multi-million-pound framework contractor. This is the type of work that we should be doing via works delivery, and obviously the type of work we're doing through high output. So that's the kind of mix of fixed and variable. But then if you look at this slide, so what that, and it's obviously the same figures, but it's shown in a slightly different way, is what this slide shows you is the blue bit is kind of what I call fixed, because that's the kind of network rail side of the business, really. It's the ballast, the rail, the sleepers, the trains, the tampers, and everything else. So that's kind of the fixed bit. And then you've got the construction survey and design costs, which is still a big chunk, but it's much smaller than the fixed bit the network rail provides. And then the other 2 smaller segments are there about the kind of the pound in the ground. If you in kind of new language again, another way of measuring us is the pound in the ground. The pound in the ground is kind of on the left-hand side, left to the left bottom, and then the other stuff is the kind of not. But there's a mix of the blue, which is also included in that. So we need to work out a way of measuring us that everybody understands, because when we're talking about these things, and then we don't even include whole life costs, which I'm going to come on to in a second, because whole life costs, if we factor that in, my unit rates are going to go up even higher. If you're talking about costs of today, but it's the cost of the future, we should be allowed to consider a lot more, and we, at the moment, we're a bit constrained with that. So, this slide, and I've got to thank Nick for the graphics on this slide. Nick helped me with this slide. You know, we have a lot of tailwinds which we're using to actually help us become more efficient. And I'll talk through some of those. You know, I think we've got one of the best, certainly in Wales and Western, track is the best at planning. Because we've got a work bank now with Andrew's support for almost the whole of CP7. So we're able to plan that work efficiently. I have got some challenges on, with links into one of the things that John was saying, that says, my starting point for any renewal, for me as the deliverer, should be I want to do all my renewals in one stage. So I've got a job in Severn Tunnel in the first 2 years of CP7. It's planned over 2 years at the moment. We've just done one half of the up main. We're going to do the other half of the up main next year. The down main, I really want to challenge the team and say, no, let's put a plan together that says that all gets delivered in one hit, one mobilisation. It's 4.25 miles long. But we just done 2.5, and we did it in with one of my most efficient numbers on that chart. Imagine I could do that in one stage. There is a balance of, obviously, we're here to run trains as well, as in we collectively. But if people keep telling me I'm expensive, my starting point will be, I want to do all my renewals in one stage then, because the schedule forecasts are not factored into my numbers. So I could be more efficient if I was allowed to do things quicker. And I've got a real challenge going on with Bristol West at the moment, which is going to help me with that. Nick, who's in the room, who hopefully some of you will get to talk to today. Nick's one of the best people that I've got at spending other people's money, because innovation funded by others means that it doesn't land on my unit rate, but it does help me with all my future mobilisations, and it's good to see some of the stuff that's in the other rooms here as well, because that's going to help us. Touching on what Peter and John were both saying, we've got to innovate to become better. I think we're great, but I know we can be better. We've got a really robust engineering and construction assurance plan, which absolutely drives our right first time. If I said to you I can't remember the last time in Wales and Western we had a post-asset installation failure, and there's many of you in the room that have been around years like I have, and it was not always like that in Wales and Western, and I can't remember the last time we had one. And I'm the track director, and I just can't remember. But that costs money, so I'm talking about it there as a tailwind, but equally on the top right there you can see as a headwind. It's not really a headwind, but I've described it as something that's a challenge for us cost-wise. That comes at a cost. So we use an expression, cost of poor quality. There's a cost of good quality as well. And I'm proud of the fact that we've got that in place such that we don't have those failures anymore. Touching wood now. So right first time, post-asset installation stuff. So the stuff on the right, I'm not going to talk through all of that because I'll be here all day probably. We've got a major issue with the second one down. over and above inflationary increases on materials, is hitting us to the tune of £4 or £5 million a year, some years, over and above inflation, because the material prices are just going through the roof, particularly for steel. It's kind of slightly out of my control because I have to use rail, unless anyone's got any plastic rail that you could give me, because I'd love to be using that one day in the future, but at the moment we can't. Standard challenges, John touched on this. If you talk about POS, if you talk about the new welding standard with the grinders, if you talk about 019, all of those things, I kind of feel that they're done to us without proper consultation. And they just landed, right, you must comply by X. And then we have to go and derogate against those because we can't comply by X. And even that welding one is hundreds of pounds on a welding shift for us, like everybody else who has to do it as well. So the challenge is we are having to challenge back, and we're going to continue to have to challenge back when we haven't got the funding available to actually cover some of those costs. Or we lose work. We lose work, and then Andrew somehow then has to manage the asset in another way because we haven't renewed it. And this is a big one here, the third from the bottom. My alliance, so I don't sit inside the alliance of one of my contractors as a whole alliance who deliver track renewals for me, as our high output and as our construction services. If I told you that Network Rail have got higher rates for labour and higher rates for plant than my supplier has, but the knock-on effect of that is then my supplier loses out because the people who want that extra 50 pence an hour will go and work for Network Rail in the contingent labour contracts because they've got higher rates. And it's not 50 pence, I'm talking pounds difference in the rate because the Alliance have negotiated really good, what we think are really good rates. But actually, the people who are suffering are the people who need that cash. The really low rates hits the people who are out there doing all this work for all of us in here. Yeah, they're the ones that are hit in the pocket. And that one there, well then in fact the bottom two, the balance of schedule forecast is not considered when we talk about unit rates of track, and it should be. And the bottom one, and there's one about access erosion there as well. Really, really challenging because we've got a massive peak demand of people at the weekend. We can't use those people in the week because there just isn't any access. In fact, one of the stats off that previous slide, which the very first slide actually, which talked about the unit rates. And when I first took on my job nationally, everybody told me how difficult Southern was. Southern's a really difficult place to work. Out of all the teams that I had delivering track renewals, Southern had the best access. Midweek, and not necessarily massive access midweek, but there was access. And at weekends, it was 50 hours every weekend almost in Southern. Not necessarily Wessex, but the old Sussex and Kent part of Southern before it was devolved. So yeah, access is a major issue for us. We've got some real problems in the Thames Valley and Wales and Western for CP7, because what we've been told is because the Lizzie line's now open, think again when it comes to the access you think you need to do all of your S&C. So Andrew's S&C plan for CP7 is quite Thames Valley heavy. So I've got to find a way of innovating to deliver that work more efficiently. Okay. If I can get rid of some of those headwinds or deal with some of those headwinds there, it means I can perhaps get closer to this affordable unit rate. But I won't be expensive, because I'll have tested this so much that it'll be the most efficient way at that point in time, the most efficient way I can do it, but it still doesn't mean I can't be more efficient. Okay, and I'm scared of seagulls, by the way. So that slide's great for me. Right, so that slide there, I'm not going to read through any of that, it's just there for information because I'm sure these slides will be shared. We recognise this problem of understanding what the unit rate actually is and how we're comparing it in Wales and Western. So it's part of the conversation a lot now, and those scatter graphs, they really help us articulate the issue. So, I don't know, a slide seems to have disappeared from there for some reason, a video slide. So anyway, I'll come back to that if we can. There was a video that should have been after that last slide. But anyway, so we have three ways of delivering track in Wales and Western. As I said, one construction services, high output, and the Alliance. So I've worked under many contract models over the last 30 odd years, and I used to work in the contract supply chain in track renewals, and I think the one I've got at the moment, doesn't mean it can't be improved, but the one I've got at the moment is probably the best that I've had. And it changes every year as well, so it's getting better. Some of the things we've done over the last couple of years have made it more open and made it better than it was before, even though before it was good too. And the Alliance is all about brand. They don't talk about themselves as Network Rail, Colas and AECOM. It's started to slip in, and I'm running a workshop in January, February time to kind of alleviate that again. But they talk about themselves as the SRSA. As some of you will know, work in Southern and Anglia as well, who use the same contract. It's open. You know, the costs are so open that if it is expensive, then I should know why, because I can see every single penny that gets spent in that contract. I am sure there's some games in there, because it's obviously, I'm the person trying to save the taxpayer money, the contractor's the person who's actually trying to make more profit. There may well be some games in there, but we've got it so open now that there shouldn't be anything hidden. There's continuity, experience. It's quite unique track. There's people who are sat in this room here, Marcus, who sat at the front here. There's so much continuity in that team that there's people who've been around a long time, which is fantastic. There's lots of experience in engineering and delivery and project management, program management in that alliance, which is fantastic. But equally, the alliance is probably the best organisation I've seen so far at developing new people who can go out there and lead track renewals on site and can be the next Marcus when Marcus decides to finish. And there's many, many people there who are only a couple of years in, who are out there, and we're trusting them to lead works for us on site. So they're brilliant at developing people. The behaviours and experience of the people that have now recently landed in, some of the people are used to working in adversarial type arrangements. They love it. And it's not for me, that. So I'm going through a process of developing some of the team, some of the engineers and some of the project management team, particularly in Network Rail space, who just have to get over that us and them approach. Talking about they delivered at the weekends. No. You delivered at the weekends. It's supposed to be an alliance. And actually it's more about Network Rail getting them to speak like that than it is the contractor part. The joint problem solving, absolutely, as you can imagine with what Peter was talking about earlier about the industrial action impact at the moment. You know, we're problem solving together almost more than we were before now. Very, very short-term planning problems we've got now. Only yesterday I was at Bristol, quite a demoralised team because I've had to speak with Andrew and cancel 2 jobs yesterday. Really, really difficult decisions. But I've got to balance the delivery and the asset management risk versus the performance risk of doing something where I don't know I'm going to get my follow-up access. So I had to cancel a job that was supposed to happen this weekend on a 125-mile-an-hour railway going through the down main at Langley. So we've got to work out a way of managing that asset now going forward. But we joint problem solve that, and that includes Andrew's team as well in the RAM organisation. There's healthy tension. Now, every relationship has tension in it. Let's say the tension at the moment is sometimes less healthy than I want it to be, which is why I'm running these workshops in January, February. But I don't mind a bit of tension, because sometimes the tension helps solve the problems. We don't have early contractor engagement, because I haven't got a contractor, I've got an alliance. And what I've done with my GRIP 1 to 3 work, I've moved GRIP 1 to 3, old language, sorry, but GRIP 1 to 3 work, I've moved that inside the alliance now. So it's not early contractor engagement. It's just the alliance of working with Andrew's team now to develop all the way from early stages of GRIP. So as I said, my development work is inside now. Andrew's given us a work bank that's allowing us to plan CP7. Fantastic, because we should be able to deliver that work in the most efficient way. We've got a good relationship. I keep mentioning Andrew. We've got a great relationship with Andrew's team. But this is rail systems contract as well. It's not just about track. We've got not as good a relationship with the other assets that we have with Andrew's team, but we've got relationships with all the asset teams because we need that. There's flexibility, and I'm going to come to this on the next point, on one of the other next points as well, that one. So if the old O'Common rail systems work was about to go out to tender back last year, I managed to convince my boss that we had the rail systems contractor there as an alliance already. So, and the biggest selling point was about the flexibility, because trust me, over the next 6 years, old O'Common will go wrong. Something will happen. There will be a decision made on the access changing. There will be a decision made on something that means the plan has to change no end of times. If I was to pick an organisation, it would be the Alliance, because they are flexible. There's a bit of kick and screaming at times, but they realise that we're all in this together. It needs to change for a reason, so it gets done. It's not perfect, and I said this to Marcus outside. It's not a perfect world that I'm selling you up here, that it's all rosy in the garden, because it's not, because it's quite tricky. Like yesterday was quite a tricky day. But I'm exploiting the contract, and the win-win-win, one of those is for net grail. So me putting that work into the Alliance at Old Oak Common means that my track unit rates can get a benefit, because some of that overhead is actually landed on Old Oak Common now and not on the work I deliver for Andrew. So there's a win-win-win, and obviously the contractor can make a little bit more money, as can the designer. So it's win-win-win all around. And exploit's a nice word. Don't think about exploiting being negative, because it's not. It's a really positive thing. And we're exploiting that contract a lot, because I need to become more efficient. So the more work I put through it, the more efficient it becomes. And the assurance piece is really, really important to me, because I need to sleep at night like we all do. And what allows me to sleep at night is knowing that that assurance plan is there. It's level, I call it level 0, but there's level 0 and level 1 assurance inside the Alliance, and equally, obviously, there's level 1 and level 2 assurance that sits outside the Alliance. That's a joint assurance plan that Ross Mahoney, my PEM, has almost carried on from our track days into this world, and that is now being copied for all the other disciplines across capital delivery in Wales and Western. Allows me to sleep. And the long-term contract piece, really, really important. So I've got 6 years left of this contract. There was talk about retendering at the end of CP6. All the other disciplines in Wales and Western are getting retendered at the end of CP6. In fact, they're in the process now. Again, managed to convince my boss, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Because one, you probably haven't got enough procurement resource to do it. And two, it's delivering really well on time, on cost, on quality, on safety. So why would we break this? Let's break it if we need to, because we're going to have to at the end of CP7, but give ourselves another, that was 7 years when that decision was made, give ourselves another 7 years to actually innovate and become more efficient. So, and that last point is a kind of link into the innovation transformation piece is, I've got Nick inside that Alliance, and it's a really, really important role for us. So Nick has got a small team of people that do the innovation and transformational stuff, and I'm going to share some of it with you here. There is a whole bucket load of it, and I've seen some of the meets outside. Nick has got a good relationship with a meet, and Julia from Scotland, so they share ideas across the whole of the track community, such that we can learn from each other and we can not invent things twice, because there are some companies out there probably that would exploit that in a negative way, where they would exploit Nick and then exploit a meet separately, and then hence we would be more inefficient. So, very, very quickly through some of these slides. The top left picture is, we talk about being green on our work sites, yet the pink and the grey bit is all about rail and sleepers. So how can we influence that? Well, we can, and it takes a piece of work. And if the sleepers piece, if I told you that I am genuinely excited about being involved with Darren Sharp, who's in the room somewhere, in the future of the sleeper, try telling your friends that, and try telling them how exciting that is. But I told the supply chain that I am genuinely excited about the fact that we're going to create a new legacy now for sleepers. Sounds pretty boring to those outside, but it's pretty exciting to me. So the composite sleeper, the reason I put this slide up is Nick is working on something. So that sleeper you can see there, and I'm going to link this back to my unit rates. That's one of my most inefficient jobs against the unit rate measure of this year. It's Chepstow Viaduct. We did both lines of Chepstow Viaduct, about 300 yards long. But we used composite sleepers. Absolutely the right thing to do. But by God, did it cost a lot of money. So from a whole life cost and sustainability perspective, it was the right solution. But it cost a lot of money. And also, Nick's going to love me for saying this, I call that the unsustainable sustainable sleeper. Because of the amount of ironwork that's on it, the amount of steel that's on top of it. So what Nick is working on is a project to actually integrate a fast lip housing into the sleeper, even if you've got guardrails that are required, which is what Chepstow has, integrate the housings for those as well, such that there's less steelwork on top of the sleeper, so it becomes a more sustainable sleeper. But still some work to do on that. And Nick's going to be around all day, so if anyone wants to talk to him about that, please feel free to do so. These are one of the things I hate. These are lerps. Obviously, I know why they're there because I've got the background of being technical myself. I know why they're there, but I know how much of a headache they are to, one, install, and two, maintain. If I told you that site on the left there, that's an S&C site at Drayton Green. And these, both my photos, I took that photo thinking I would use it, and I knew I would eventually someday, and I've used it a couple of times now. I spent about £450,000 installing lerps on that site. So we need to find another solution because that's not a sustainable solution, and it's not a practical solution. Has anybody in the room ever tried to install one of these? Yeah, they're not the easiest thing to install either. So we need to work on a way of actually maybe getting rid of them. That site there is Bristol East. And again, you look, that track is never going anywhere. The fact that it's pretty heavy anyway, because it's got a check rail on it, and it's pretty heavy bearers, and there's a platform on the outside of the curve, and we've put lerps on it. If Armageddon comes, that track's still going to be there, along with Great Western Electrification. It'll all still be there. So yes, we need to work on that. And working with Darren, and Darren's got a slot later on, so I'm not going to steal any of his thunder. We need to work on, if this is a reality that USPs could become the new LERP in a way, then absolutely Nick and I are going to support this project all the way through to the end until we get there. So this, and I'll just let this play for a bit, not for long. This is Bristol East, and it's not playing for some reason. But anyway, that's Bristol East Junction. The video's not playing, unless I can press a button on here. No. But anyway, that Bristol East Junction, I did have to fight a little bit for the cash to install undersleeper pads on that junction. But the only way I was able to fund it was by me creating my own efficiency. So we created about £450,000 worth of efficiency on the job, and then got the agreement to spend some of that efficiency on undersleeper pads. And I'm going to declare that I think it's one of the reasons why that junction, I don't think it's had well, I know it hasn't had a major failure since September 2021 when it was installed. 50 units of S&C. Normally when we were installing S&C years ago, we would have the odd failure. We haven't had a major failure. There's been a few minor signalling issues with it, but nothing on that. And it's a 50-unit S&C job. And going back to the Alliance Works, and there's people in here who worked on that project, probably one of the best jobs I've ever seen delivered. Absolutely fantastic. And I see I've got 2 minutes left, so I'll flick through these. Right, we're working with AIVR, so one big circle, and mission room. Focus on the stuff in red there. We had and on the next slide I'm going to show you something we're doing. We had a near miss recently at Westerly where 9 people could have got bowled over because they were walking the wrong line. Doing a Thursday pre-weekend visit, they were walking the down, they should have been walking the up, they had a line block on the up, could have been bowled over. So my challenge to the team is, why did they need to go out there to do that weekend pre-site visit? We're working with One Big Circle and Mission Room to create us a joint virtual walkthrough such that it can take some of those walkthroughs away, but equally, all the stuff in red, I won't work through that list because I've got about a minute left. All of that stuff, it's going to pay for itself. I've spent a fair bit of taxpayers' money on this, but I'm glad I have because I'm going to save more than that taxpayers' money over the next 6 years with this alliance. That is simple, and one of the reasons I'm doing it is because of that near miss we had at Westerly. These are going to go on everywhere in Wales and Western. I'm engaging also with Southern and now North West and Central. At every access point on the track, you're going to see them. Because people are, at least once a week probably, somebody over the UK is going onto track in a line block, walking the wrong line and having a near miss. It's a simple concept, but simple ideas save lives. It's not the big whiz-bangy tech stuff that you're going to see outside. But everything else on the railway seems to be marked up, but we've never really marked up all of the track. So we're going to mark up all of the track now. At every access point and at critical junctions like Bristol East you just saw, the track's going to be marked up with basic information such that people can't get it wrong. It's a last layer of protection for the people who we are all here to protect. And then there's some other stuff, which I'll go very quickly through these. We need a replacement for Kirovs in the future. They're going to be clapped out in a few years' time, I'm sure. So Nick's working on this. Please feel free to talk to Nick today. The MFS Pluses have gone from well, I think they're still here, but we can't procure them for some reason. So Nick is working on, is there a road rail version of an MFS Plus we can use that can actually work in single bore tunnels and feed the MFSs that sit outside the tunnel? So please feel free again to talk to Nick or I today. And the last one, induction welding. We've been talking about this for so long. This is game-changing, absolutely game-changing. but we're just struggling to give it that last push over the line. This is one of the projects that Nick is spending somebody else's money on, which I'm glad, because we're going to get it over the line eventually, because for me, it'll revolutionise S&C renewals and Plainline, but more so S&C, and it'll bring that unit rate down even further. And I'm sure, and in fact I know, that this is certainly more sustainable than a thermit welder we go and drop out on track. So that's me, and the final bit is, so if we innovate, deliver to all of my clients' need, because I deliver for lots of third-party people as well, and we do it collaboratively, we'll remove that perception, but we know that we can always be better. And that's me. Thank you very much.